Backfire exotic SMG, core strength, close range, high risk. Except on this build it's not. This is the Daywalker build, where we're gonna get all of the strength and none of its weaknesses. What's good everyone, Rognus here and welcome to my channel where I do the math so you don't have to. Deep dives on build theory, gear optimization, and the stuff that actually matters, because remember, when you're built different, you hit different. Now let's get it going. Now before we get into the build, I want to talk about something that's been on my mind. The Division 2 is fundamentally a cover shooter. In the way the game is designed, you're naturally incentivized to play at distance, stay in cover, manage sightlines, and pick your targets carefully. That's the intended loop for most of the content. The problem is, for those of us that want to play at close range, running an SMG or a shotgun and getting in the enemy's face carries significantly more risk with significantly less reward. You're more exposed, you're easier to suppress, and you're taking more damage. And at the end of the run, you're looking at the after action report where a striker build sitting safely in cover at range is doing more damage than you. That to me seems backwards. Basic game design across dozens of titles and shooters follow a very different principle. It's high risk, high reward, right? So you have your classic AK-47 variant of a high damage AR that can't handle for anything. Or on the flip side of that, you have your ultra accurate, let's say SCAR ACR variant that doesn't really hit hard, right? It's all a balancing act. It's give and take. That's the language of balance. So an SMG at close range should not be matchable by any AR at distance. Not because ARs and LMG are bad, they're not, and nerfing them would only reduce the already limited build variety and high tier escalations, but actually rewarding close range play would expand that variety and allow for something the game desperately needs more of, and I think that's skill expression. Think about it this way. If a patch dropped today, giving all SMGs a flat 15% damage increase, how many of us would trade in our ARs and LMGs for an SMG in high tier escalation? Honestly, not many. And that tells you everything about where the balance is right now. Even the most skilled player in the room, cracked out of his mind, forehead to the screen, optimal position after optimal position, perfect target priority, surviving close quarters and high escalation. You mean to tell me it makes sense for him to get out damaged by somebody sitting safely at range with an AR? The risk just simply isn't being rewarded. And again, I'm not saying nerf anything. I'm saying incentivize some of the alternatives. Make close range viable. Let skill expression actually mean something. And this connects to something else the community has been vocal about, and that's the targeted loot and escalations. I actually think the rotation concept is fine. Having different sets available on different days makes the content feel more dynamic, similar to how the Dark Zone operates. The problem, in my opinion, isn't the system. The problem is that because of the lack of build diversity that's actually viable in high tier escalations, there are really only about 4 to 5 gear sets that people want to farm. So when one of those 5 isn't in rotation for days on end, it could feel bad. And when one of those 5 finally does show up in rotation, and then the targeted loot is bugged, i.e. core strength a couple of days ago, that feels even worse. The solution isn't changing how the rotation works, provided it actually works. The solution, in my opinion, is making more sets worth farming in the first place. Expand the viable build pool, and suddenly every rotation day has something that people would want. Which brings me back to this build. Because if close range SMG builds were properly rewarded, if Backfire and core strength was genuinely competitive with Striker at high tier escalations, you'd have more people farming different things. More builds would be worth running, and that would mean more loot worth chasing. Alright, but let's actually get into this build. That's enough of my soapbox in requests for content and things actually worth farming. So for this build, like I said, we're running the Backfire. It's an exotic SMG, and if you ever run it, you know exactly what the talent does. Every time you reload, you inflict a bleed upon yourself. It's a self-inflicted cost built into the weapon to make up for and balance the incredibly high crit hit damage that you can get at full stack. High output, high risk, and most people put it down after a few minutes because the self-damage can feel unsustainable at times. That's the weakness we're eliminating. The Daywalker concept is simple. The Backfire gives us an extraordinary damage output of 200% additional crit damage at full stacks on top of whatever crit hit damage we already have. That's not a small number, that's the strength. The weakness is the bleed on reload, so we build specifically around absorbing it. Hazard protection on 3 of the gear pieces plus the Hollow Man 1 piece bonus. We have a Crusader Shield at tier 6 that's going to give us damage reduction, as well as our Defender drone at tier 4 that's going to give us some additional damage reduction while it's active. Alright, we have the Gunner spec, and that's going to give us some armor on kill, so that every kill heals us. Every engagement where the drone is up, we're taking reduced damage, and every engagement where the shield is up, we're also obviously taking reduced damage. The hazard protection rolls are reducing the Backfire bead directly, so the weapon is still hurting us, but the build is designed not to care. That's how we're getting all of the strength of the Backfire and none of the weakness. Now, a question you could be asking yourself is, why core strength? It doesn't give us any native hazard protection built into it. Well, here's the mechanic, just to recap. Each core gives us its native benefit. Red gives us weapon damage, yellow gives us a skill tier, and blue gives us armor. That's the standard. What core strength does is add, with the chess piece, 75% of the other two non-equipped cores on top of that. So the red core doesn't just give you weapon damage, it also gives you armor and skill efficiency. A yellow core doesn't just give you the skill tier, it gives you armor and weapon damage. A blue core obviously works the same. So on this build we have no wasted slots. Every core is contributing to damage, survivability, and skill power at the same time. Let me show you what exactly every core on this build is contributing. We have 2 red cores, one from the Hollow Man Mask and the second from the Memento. This is giving us a total of 30% weapon damage, plus 255k armor, plus 22.5% skill efficiency. Now we have 4 yellow cores, that being the chest, gloves, knee pads, and the Memento yellow core. That is giving us 4 skill tiers, plus 510k armor, plus 45% weapon damage. Lastly, we have 2 blue cores, which are the holster and the Memento blue core. That is giving us 340k armor, plus 22.5% weapon damage and skill efficiency. So added up across all our cores, we're getting 97.5% weapon damage, over 1.1 million armor contribution from the cores alone, as well as 45% skill efficiency. And 4 skill tiers, of course. Now, here's where it gets specific to this build. The yellow cores give skill tiers for all of our skills. Obvious, duh. But the blue cores actually count as skill tiers specifically for the Crusader Shield. So our 4 yellow cores give us tier 4 on both skills, and the Memento blue core and the holster blue core push the shield specifically to tier 6. So a tier 6 shield and a tier 4 drone is what we're running simultaneously on this build. So we have 8 cores doing 3 jobs each, and we have 0 wasted slots. That's beautiful. Now let's head to the range and talk numbers. Same methodology as always, we build our calc out while we're theory crafting, and then we head to the range to make sure that there are no surprises and everything is working as intended. So the weapon card reads 122,651. That's our clean starting point with everything additive already baked in. Our weapon damage rolls, shade watch, and specialization bonus. We have 2 brackets on top of that. Damage to target out of cover at plus 10%, as well as the Hollow Man giving us 14% damage to health. The damage to health is particularly valuable on this build because as we're trying to get into mid-tier escalations, the enemies already are starting to have substantially larger health pools, and it sits in its own separate multiplicative bracket on top of everything else. Now the Backfire stacks, at full stacks we get 200% additional crit hit damage on top of our crit hit damage of 71.4% at base. So our total crit hit damage at full stacks is 271.4%. This means our predicted body crit at full stacks with no memento involved is 571,229. So let's see it at the range. As you can see, we're getting 566,036. Our prediction was 571k. That's a delta of less than 1%, rounding across multiple multiplicative brackets, so we'll call that accurate for now. But we're gonna double check and involve our momentum long-term stacks. As you know, full long-term stacks of memento gives plus 30% weapon damage. But because this build already has a massive weapon damage bucket from the core strength, the red cores, and the shade watch, that 30% doesn't actually give you an additional 30% more damage, it's additive into the weapon damage bucket. So it's already sitting at 137.5%, so the real gain is about 12.6% of actual damage increase. This baked in, our prediction is going to be 637,535. Let's see what we get at the range. So as you can see, our actual value that we're getting is 636,646. We called 637,000, that's a delta of 0.14%. So we'll call that good. It seems everything's operating as intended. Another part of the calculation that's been requested, and I actually think is a good idea, is let's go over our build's DPS, damage per second, as well as our DPM, our damage per minute. At 60% crit hit chance weighted, we're looking at 6.38 million DPS while firing, which is 271 million damage per minute. That's sustained with reloads factored in and using the gunner's faster third reload. And those numbers don't include momentum short-term trophies, which stack on top of that during aggressive play. That only adds to the ceiling, making this a monster close-range SMG build. Here's the full setup. For the mask, we're running the Hollow Man, and this is doing 2 big jobs for us simultaneously. First, it's giving us plus 14% damage to health in its own multiplicative bracket, and secondly, it's giving us 1-piece hazard protection bonus, reducing the Backfire bleed on reload. Next, we're running the core strength chest with the talent pushing us from 40 to 75% of the bonus cores. On the chest, we have a crit hit chance roll as well as a crit hit chance mod. This is one of the pieces that's helping us hit our 60% crit hit chance cap. For the backpack, we have the Memento exotic. It's giving us 1 core of each, which is giving us a big buff with our core strength year set, as well as rewarding you with small and long-term buffs as you collect trophies. For the gloves, we're running core strength with a yellow core and a hazard protection roll. For the holster, we're running a blue core with hazard protection roll. The blue core here is one of the 2 that pushes the Crusader Shield specifically to tier 6. For the knee pads, we're running core strength, yellow core, hazard protection roll. So in all, we have 3 hazard protection rolls on our gear, plus the Hollow Man one piece, all helping us fight that Backfire bleed. The primary, obviously we're running the Backfire, we've already covered that. For the secondary, I do think that the first bloom fits this very well. It gives us a ranged option as well as something to dig into high health and high armor targets. The first bloom's amplified damage talent has more sustained uptime on these kinds of enemies, which is precisely the weakness of the Backfire exotic SMG. Because we don't want to stand toe to toe with the Chunga for very long, we want to be able to burn the enemies down quicker and collect the trophies for sustainability. So all the beefier targets, I engage with the first bloom to start to cut them down, and then I'll swap over to the Backfire if need be. As the specialization, we're running the gunner. This gives us armor on kill, which again synergizes directly with the self-damage mitigation. Every kill is healing us, while the drone and shield are protecting us. The faster third reload is already baked into the damage per minute calculation, so that just improves our overall damage output. For the skills, as we said, we're running the shield as well as the defender drone. So all in all, the build hurts itself due to the Backfire's talent, but we're healing ourselves faster than we hurt. Now for the honest take. This is still an SMG build, and despite everything we've done to make it close range viable, the fundamental reality of the Division 2's design means that you're taking on more risk than a build sitting at a distance. The mitigation is real, but so is the exposure. Backfire stacks take time to build at times, and in the opening moments of an engagement before full stacks, you're not hitting those high numbers. If you die and reset, you're starting the ramp all over again. Builds that don't require a ramp or can ramp up safely at a distance do have the advantage in content if you're dying regularly. The Backfire bleed is super manageable with the setup, but it is still there. In the highest tier escalation content where enemies are hitting significantly harder, the self-damage compounds with incoming damage in ways that can become punishing. The build performs best in content where you can maintain momentum. When momentum stops, when you're forced into cover and when the stacks drop, when the bleed is ticking and you're also taking heavy fire, you start to feel those limitations. Now a practical note on solo versus group. Running this solo, I actually swapped the Crusader Shield out for the Revive Hive. It gives me an extra oops button in case things go wrong, and the defender drone is still absorbing a good amount of damage, and at close range I can play in cover, and I find that it works well and I've had good success with it. And if I was specifically optimizing this for solo exclusive, I'd swap the blue core on the holster to another yellow core. That way we could push that defender drone from tier 4 to tier 5. That would give it more health and more damage reduction for us. In group play, however, this build runs super well as shown. The shield and drone together giving you extra damage mitigation as you're pushing up close and drawing aggro. This synergizes well with a lot of your teammates so that they don't have to deal with it. Your striker buddy can sit safely at range, spraying targets that will thank you for all the damage you absorb on their behalf. All in all, I will say, play to the build's identity, get close, stay aggressive, keep the stacks up, and let the Memento build, and trust the mitigation layer. When this build is operating as intended, close quarters, high momentum, and kill chaining, it's genuinely one of the most satisfying builds that I've run, and the numbers back that up. So to wrap it up, the Backfire isn't unrunnable. The self-damage is real, but it's a solvable problem. The Hollow Man, the 3 hazard protection rolls, and your tier 6 and tier 4 drone and shield respectively, plus the gunner armor on kill turns a punishing exotic into a build identity. The Daywalker isn't a gimmick, it's a legitimate build framework. Additionally, this is what an incentivized close range playstyle could look like. It's more risk, yes, but the payout is there. And that's the argument this build makes every time it clears a room. And frankly, it's fun. It's funner to be able to run and gun at times. It's funner to be able to push down on an enemy and not have to wait for him to stick his head out of cover. We just walk down on it, right? It's fun. It gives a refreshing change of pace to the game. And I think the game should have more of this. More build diversity means more loot worth farming, means more reasons to log in. And I think the Daywalker build is one data point in that argument. On this Backfire build, we have all of the strength and none of the weakness. If this video helped you in any way, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. It goes a long way in helping me bring you more of the stuff that actually matters, because remember, when you're built different, you hit different.